Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Welcome to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. Charles, what are we talking about on today's episode?
Cargo theft, cargo fraud, things going missing.
Yep, it happens way more than you'd think it would, and it's pretty crazy, and it's been a pretty interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other places this can go, and this is kind of just scratching the surface.
Yep, but before we get too far into it, like normal, we are on YouTube. We're pretty much everywhere you listen to podcasts, so if you could go rate, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, that helps push us out a little bit further and helps us do a little bit more cool stuff.
You can also go to centspermilepodcast.com where you can suggest a topic to be a guest or to become a sponsor.
Sponsors. Who's our sponsor today, Charles?
We got Driver's Legal Plan. They're the most experienced CDL defense firm. You should check them out. They're at driverslegalplan.com.
All right. And the other thing, too, is we have a special link that you can click and you can get a discount on your tickets to the Future of Freight Festival put on by FreightWaves. Because you know a guy.
Or guys.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that being said, it is time to get to the news. All right, so it's time for 10-2 News, where we look back at CDLLife and get some of the most interesting, related, or crazy articles from the past couple weeks. And today, the first thing we got is that truck drivers are being asked to weigh in on cargo theft. The American Transportation Research Institute has found that cargo theft is such a prominent issue that they're actually collecting data to put out some information on it and create some data.
Yeah, I mean, they estimate that the theft cost about 15 to 30 billion per year.
That's insane. That's, considering most trucking companies, if you're doing good, you operate on like a 6% profit margin. That's pretty huge.
Well, imagine just the insurance claims. And then everyone was talking in our last episode about the insurance going up. This is one of the main contributors.
All right. Well, speaking of running a trucking company, I don't know that that's an appropriate segue. But there was this lady who ran a trucking company out of Michigan, and she went missing a few years back. And recently, the police found bodily remains on the premises of the trucking company. So there's not a lot of details, but her family had been notified. So that's kind of a developing story, but that's pretty crazy.
You think about it, it is Michigan. and imagine trucking. It's a very volatile market. So I'm sure we'll get more out of this, but I imagine there's definitely some kind of correlation between the people that were working there, some kind of disgruntled employee or family member. Something's going to come out of this that's going to make some breaking news.
Yeah, and it is a serious situation, but not something to be taken lightly. But I am very curious, and we'll definitely update on this if something does come out. With that being said, it's time for Behind the Wheel. All right, so it's time for Behind the Wheel. Being powered by CDLLife and Hot Seat Services, CDLLife has the largest audience of drivers in the world. With that, we get access to the driver audience. We can ask them questions. We can also get a lot of data that some people don't have access to. And we can basically get real opinions and real information about real issues. So today we're talking about cargo theft. And we're going to do some loose, easy math. Right. So truck drivers, when they're on their 10-hour break, so parking is an issue, and sometimes you just end up parking in some pretty sketchy spots. But truck drivers, as you know, have to take 10-hour breaks. Well, the interesting thing is those drivers are responsible for the load they're carrying.
Absolutely, they are. And it's one of the most common conversations and arguments that drivers have is I'm responsible for my freight. even though I'm off, and per DOT, I'm not supposed to be responsible for anything other than getting my rest. So it's one of those, common struggles is how can I do this effectively if I'm sleeping or if I'm in the shower? And if you look at where a lot of the cargo theft and stuff like that take place, it's in the areas where they're parking. It's not while they're driving.
Right. Unless you got some Fast and Furious stuff going on. So that being said, we kind of did some loose math. So, a lot of over the road truck drivers typically get about a day off for about every week they're out. So if you do that, that's about a month and a half off a year. You take that, you break that down with the rest of the weeks. And then you subtract 4 34-hour resets within that. You end up with about 245 10-hour breaks, which comes out to somewhere around 2,400 hours. So at the federal minimum wage, that's about $17,000 to $18,000 a year that if you paid them minimum wage, they would make for being responsible for that trailer. Considering, if you were a security guard, which makes an average of $14.27, you're probably going to come out with about $28K. But let's focus on the minimum wage. That means that driver, if they actually got paid to secure that trailer and make sure that that trailer was okay, they're leaving like $17,000 to $18,000 a year on the table for the average OTR driver.
Yeah. When we talk about pay and we talk about the responsibility and, cross-referencing to other jobs in other sectors, it's one of the things that just don't make sense is something's got to give. Either they're not responsible and they're fully not responsible when they're off the clock, which if you read the DOT legislation, that's pretty much how it's written, or they are responsible and then we need to be paying them. And then how efficient and effective is it going to be if they're sleeping because they have to get rest?
Yeah, well, and I mean, sometimes I do wonder about, cost effectiveness and something like stuff like that. But I mean, at the same time, it's people's careers, it's their well-being. And it's just morale at that point, and you look at, you talked about how much, the cost has been, annually for cargo theft. And then you look at what this would cost. It's like, sometimes it's like, is it worth it? Especially for your relationship with your customers.
Well, with that being said, we should get behind the desk.
Getting drivers on the road has never been more stressful. Carriers want to grow, but find themselves buried in paperwork, wasting time on ineffective marketing, slow hiring processes, and outdated systems. Add the constant anxiety of complying with changing safety regulations. One wrong move, you could lose it all. Enter Tenstreet. Now imagine, no more paperwork. Instead, with a simple click, you log into a powerful all-in-one platform that will help you market, recruit, onboard, manage, and retain your drivers. We offer powerful technology solutions for the trucking industry, like JobStore, our online marketplace where you can seamlessly post to over 20 job boards with just a few clicks. IntelliApp, which uses the power of pre-population to reduce a driver's time to apply from hours to minutes. And Driver Pulse, our mobile app that connects carriers to drivers. Using tools like these means more qualified applicants, reduced time to hire, and integrated systems. Whether you have one truck or 1,000, our dedicated expert teams partner with you to streamline your processes and grow your business. With Tenstreet, you can sleep soundly, knowing you can pass an audit, attract the drivers you need, and achieve your business goals. Join the thousands of carriers using Tenstreet. Sign up for a personalized demo to see how we can give you peace of mind and help your business thrive.
Attention truckers, it only takes one ticket to lose your job because of unnecessary traffic convictions. But you can protect your career with Driver's Legal Plan, an actual national law firm dedicated to protecting the rights of truck drivers. We make the highest quality legal representation available to truck drivers, and we make it affordable. You can rest easy knowing you have a trucker's attorney always on your side. Call Driver's Legal Plan today to start protecting your driving record and your career.
All right, so it's time to make sense. And our main topic today is cargo theft. Charles, you seemed pretty passionate about, choosing this as an option, for an episode. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, it's only fitting that it's on Makes Sense, because this just doesn't make any sense. It's one of the longest reigning problems in trucking, and we have very little progression in solving it. It revolves around so many different moving parts: parking, drivers' hours of service, locations, not wanting drivers to park on location until an hour or two prior to their appointment. I mean, there's so many things that can contribute to solving this that haven't moved at all.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing with that too is it's just like you don't hear about it like you hear about other things. So it is almost like it's not a front of mind kind of thing, and it's another one of those things that it seems the industry is just kind of taking the L on. It's like, oh well, this is just going to happen. What are we going to do about it? Not much we can do about it.
14 to 30 billion dollars a year. You think we'd be trying to mobilize some solutions to this, but here we are. We're still fighting for bathroom access, but we can't even take care of something that's costing us billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, I mean, it just I don't even. Sometimes I'm at a loss, especially like until we did this, I didn't realize how big the numbers were because of like how much it doesn't get talked about. I'm surprised that this isn't more of like a forefront conversation.
Well, it is for some people. For some people, they're actively working to solve this because, again, there's so many different angles you can attack this from. It's from validating carriers to working with the right brokers to, all the different relationships that can help mitigate this on the front end. But there's still the back end of this, where drivers are parking. I mean, when I was driving, we were hauling batteries out of Georgia, and they had a rule where drivers could not stop for the first 3 hours after leaving there because it was very prominent in that area. People would follow trucks out and wait for them to get fuel and then rob the batteries out the back of the trailer.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so there's that, and then like I guess maybe because you talked about both sides of it, and obviously I understand the idea of the parking situation and like trailers getting broken into, and maybe someone who says that they're a broker or something like that that really just poses and offers a cheap rate and like then steals your stuff. But like what other examples have you kind of seen of this for people who aren't necessarily educated on it that well, like myself?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen anything from carriers being misrepresented by people stealing their DOT numbers to pick up a load and it's stolen from the time it gets loaded. I've seen it from the point of view where the freight's being stolen off the back of the trailers when the drivers are parked. I've seen drivers get robbed at gunpoint while driving. They get forced into a stop and then robbed. I mean, you're seeing all kinds of different angles that could be worked here. And that's just on this portion of it. There's so many other scams out there that can hit trucking companies that it's no wonder why the margins are as slim as they are in some of these cases.
Yeah, and before we go to our guest, that just reminded me of kind of a throwback. You remember that time we did the story on the truck driver who had the load of chicken and was like selling it off of the truck?
Well, yeah, sometimes the driver can be the culprit too. When they're getting 40 cents a mile for 5 years experience, I mean, guys got to pay the bills, put food on the table.
So with that, who is our guest today, Charles?
We got a friend of mine, Sage. Welcome to Cents Per Mile.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
We're talking about cargo theft, cargo fraud, and you work on the brokerage side of things, and you've been in trucking for a bit, so would love to tap you for a little bit of knowledge and insight here.
Yeah, so I've been in trucking. I've had my CDL. I've been a carrier, and now I'm a broker, and I move specialized freight now. So a lot of my freight's not getting stolen when it's 20 foot tall and stuff. But a lot of the issues that we're having in the industry is the fact that it's looked as just breakage, right? So you say it's $30 billion in a $1 trillion industry. So who it actually affects the most is the small carrier that had something stolen. So that's when that small carrier has to really start to look out for himself, or small brokerage that might lose a customer and be thrown under the bus because this stuff's stolen. So unfortunately, the big picture of it is being just kind of passed over, but the little picture of actually who it actually damages in the long run is the issue. And as a broker, you want to, the main thing is establishing either a network of carriers to work with, or finding a new carrier and being able to run them through some type of system that you can have information like a portfolio about them, so that you can have them in there and say, okay, this guy's good. He's handled it before. He knows the routine. He knows what we're looking at. And as brokers, that's what we're kind of pushing for more and more, is that portfolio system that I can reference every time when I do have freight that could be a stolen situation. Because like I said, it's going to hurt that carrier and that small brokerage more than anybody.
I got to ask you on this. You sit on the brokerage side of things, and you see a lot of the brokers' conversations regarding screening the drivers, screening the carriers, and a lot of drivers are very abrasive to this process. But I wonder if it all stems as a way to try to solve this whole fraud problem.
Yeah, I think, and it's a lot in my being a broker, and don't hold that against me and start, swatting me, but
Too late, my guy.
that being a broker, what you have to understand is I feel there's a lot of bad broker training. My job when I'm talking to a carrier, it's an interview process, and I'm going through an interview just like you would be applying for a job. And I'm going to look at this interview, and some carriers come with a resume, and they're going to say, hey, I do this, I've done this, I've done this. But if they haven't, I got to basically interview them and see if they bring value to my company and if they're the right fit. So a lot of times when I'm, posting a load and then, talking to a carrier, I ask them about their equipment. I ask because truck drivers like to talk about their equipment. So that's a good sign that they're not a fraudulent carrier. They can answer the questions about the equipment. They like to talk about their Kenworth or their Peterbilt, the type of equipment. I do open deck. They like to talk about if they're a specific style of step deck, like a low profile one or a standard. And it's that interview process that you have to be quick with, but it can't be skipped, and it can't be just, thrown out where you're just grabbing. You really want to know about the person that's going to haul your freight. And that interview process of that one-on-one is how you learn that about who you're going to be assigning to then haul your customers' freight and keep food on your table. So it's something that brokers need to start learning how to do and making that a key point of when they interview drivers.
It sounds like it's the equivalent of like a VA physical, like turn your head, cough. Do you pass enough to, carry my freight?
Yeah, sometimes it is. And sometimes you got to be able to get that feeling. Like anytime, like I said, for hiring for positions, you want to hire the right person for the position that, because that's going to make your company more profitable. It's going to make your company more efficient. And that's how you have to look at the drivers that you're hiring. So you hope that the drivers are open to that and open to being able to be asked questions and answer them. And if you approach it properly, you'll get that. It's when you speed through and you don't really pay attention is when brokers seem to be hiring carriers that might just not even be real carriers. The next thing you know, your freight's gone and you're the broker that's in trouble with that.
So how often does that happen? Like from a brokerage standpoint, you assign a load to a carrier and then it turns out it's a fraudulent carrier.
It's happening more and more often since because of COVID and the amount of carriers that came in to the market. But it's happening more and more because of that. And it's up to us in the private sector to try to find either technology or ways to be able to weed through that process.
Well, on Cents Per Mile, we're all about tackling those tough topics, but we're also about bringing solutions. So our guests coming on later in the show, they're exactly that, a solution to this. So I'm interested to hear what they have to say. But from a brokerage standpoint, if you had to offer one piece of advice on a way to do this correctly to mitigate any loss, what comes to the forefront of your mind?
Find technology that works, use that technology, and keep a consistent way of bringing the right carriers into your business.
All right. Well, appreciate you stopping on Cents Per Mile, Sage, and look forward to having more conversations to come.
Stan, thank you so much for letting me talk.
Hot Seat Services has Rent-A-Recruiter.
Wait!
Hey Michael, have you heard that Hot Seat Services Rent-A-Recruiter service will place their staff in your organization similar to a temporary hire model?
No way, what else does it do?
Follow me, I have to tell everyone. They take leads in existing databases to put new hires into your business's trucks.
Well, shiver me timbers! What else?
Come on! Their model is more cost efficient because their recruiters are trained and can get your pipeline flowing easier and faster.
No way. Anything else?
No matter how many hires they make, it's a set cost per week, so the more they get, the better their client's cost per hire gets.
Holy sh**.
For more information and to find out for yourself, go to hotseatservices.com.
All right, well, that was a lot of really good information, like usual, from our guests. But it kind of left me with a question, because he talked about how he did like more specialized type stuff. And now I just want to research and find out if there's ever been an incident where someone maybe stole a truck where the trailer was loaded with like a windmill blade.
I'm not sure it's easy enough to, get rid of that and get a return on your time spent to take it.
I mean, I don't know. People do some crazy stuff, man. I would just be curious, like, I mean, but like what that would look like with like specialized stuff. Obviously stuff that's big enough to where you need permits, but like if you got something really big on the flatbed, some like heavy machinery that maybe doesn't require like a block car and stuff. I would be curious what that looks like.
I'm sure they go through those lots and they're like, yeah, that just doesn't look like something that's going to service what we're looking for. We're going to pass and go to the box trailer and just like, we'll take the mystery box.
I'm just saying, could you imagine, like, he talked about, sometimes like people will just walk out of the truck stop and their truck's gone. But like, could you imagine like losing track of a bulldozer?
I could just see him trying to offload that on the back end. Like, hey, I got this nice Peterbilt, this nice flatbed trailer, and I'll even throw in a bulldozer on top of it for no extra cost.
Right. No, that's pretty absurd. But what was your favorite takeaway from talking to Sage, or biggest takeaway, I guess, necessarily?
I think it's interesting because it's not often we get brokers on and we take it easy on them, but to get one on to share their insights as far as what they're doing to help combat this, because it makes their job difficult. Their reputation of their company's at stake when they're giving out these loads. So if these loads are going to fraudulent carriers because they're not doing their due diligence, and that's just helping mitigate it. That doesn't mean everything they do is going to be 100%. There's still the opportunity for someone to commit fraud. So when it's affecting their business, their reputation, I think it's nice to know that some of them are going that extra couple steps that we might view as an inconvenience. But when you start to look at the bigger picture, it all checks out.
You're not wrong in saying that, but I mean, and we've given a lot of consolations on the show, but like, I don't know how you just kind of made me feel bad for brokers.
Here, I'll make you feel better. We did have one that said transparency in brokerage is the same as socialism. So there you go. You feeling better now?
No, it's just odd. It's so, that's the one thing I love about the show is we get so many different perspectives that, even things that you have set in your mind, you learn things. You're like, oh, this is interesting. But speaking of learning things, we have some more guests, right, Charles?
Yeah, I brought some friends on. I brought Dale Prax from Freight Validate and Meg Boaz from MyCarrierPortal on to talk to us about freight fraud.
Hey, thanks for having us on the show, Charles. I really appreciate the invite.
No, we're all about talking about the problems, but we like to also offer solutions. And it seems like that's kind of your corner of the market. So I'd love to hear about how you guys are helping solve this problem.
Sure. And I'll start with saying that I've been a freight broker for 32 years, so nothing you say to me will hurt my feelings. So, but I've also been a truck driver, an owner-operator, owned a trucking company. So I've been around the block a little bit. And that's probably what got us into fighting the fraud problem, because as a freight broker, we see all these, so-called solutions, starting with the FMCSA down to every platform out there. And I just decided that not many of these platforms have somebody that's got 32 years of experience in the trenches, seeing the freight that's happened, seeing freight around us, and really having ways that maybe we can mitigate it.
Well, and certainly the FMCSA is not bringing any solutions or experience.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I could go for hours about, just a conversation I had this morning with the director of the FMCSA where, we're not just a vetting company. Working MyCarrierPortal, we're like, if you went to the airport, I'm the guy that checks the passenger, make sure they're good to go, they're who they say they are, identity, all those kind of things. And then MyCarrierPortal checks the baggage. So I don't let them get past the gate if they aren't who they say they are. And then MyCarrierPortal checks to make sure they're not putting a gun in the suitcase. Now, if they do, I know who they are. And I know they're in compliance with the law. But we do that. That's a primary mission. But the other mission is to educate the drivers, the owner-operators, the brokers, and what to look for, and to even fix their own information. For instance, yesterday, when we started our integration with MyCarrierPortal last Friday, yesterday I get a call from a company who says, hey, the carrier I'm using is disqualified in your system. Why is that? And so we look him up, and his principal place of business is a post office box. That's a violation of 49 CFR 390.5T, has been forever. This carrier has been in business since 1974. They changed that address to a P.O. box in 1975. So for almost 60 years, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has never done a new entry audit or any other audit on this company to find out that there's a violation of of a regulation. So how could this broker show up when a broker wants to look at this carrier and says, this guy doesn't even have a safety rate. He's been around for 60 years. So it's not just bad guys using post office boxes. They're good guys, just don't know the rules. So we try and teach those guys the rules. So in this particular case, we told them how to do it. Fill out your MCSA 5889. A lot of people think to use the 150, but 5889 is really the form of one to use because it's faster. So this person sent in a 150, and they called us this morning and says, I still have a red X that shows that I'm in violation of the regulation. And that's because the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration changes address in SMS, changing on company snapshot, but licensing insurance still shows the old address. So I got a hold of the director and said, how can this happen? We have 3 separate documents. And his answer was, our systems don't talk well to each other. They don't communicate well with each other. But we're working on that in our next modernization initiative. Well, that doesn't help people now trying to fight fraud when you say to look up their address to make sure it's correct, when the FMCSA doesn't even know if it's correct or not because they're using communication systems that don't communicate with each other. So to make a long story short, what we are really, between our integration with MyCarrierPortal, we are the QA department for the FMCSA.
Nice. And so from Meg, from your perspective, how are you helping combat this over at MyCarrierPortal?
I think just to kind of touch on a couple of things that Dale said that kind of segue into what we do pretty well. It's not just the guys who don't know that they're breaking the law, but then also, you have a lot of people who have this technology and they're spending all this money, but they actually don't know how to utilize it fully. I just had an experience actually yesterday with a customer, and she said that she had a load stolen. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, well, give me the DOT. Let me look it up. And the first thing I did was, I pulled it up, shared my screen, and showed her that, there was an alert that an FMCSA change had been made within the last 60 days. So, I think that just properly informing your customers on how to use your tech, which is like mainly the reason why I'm here now, is huge, But I think, moreover, MyCarrierPortal is just really focused on we don't have very much overlap with Freight Validate. So Freight Validate is 1000% objective. And then, we have VIN validation. We have a lot of things that are objective also. But then we also kind of like to utilize a huge community of customers who have had, this happened to us. Hey, I want to warn you. It's not saying you can't use this guy. You can set up risk assessments, you can customize your profile, but it's more so like learning from your customers, warning other people. But then I think where me and Dale come in is we're trying to like stop it from even becoming like a report at all.
So it's kind of cool that you guys are putting things in place where people can educate themselves at the risk level and then make informed decisions. My question that derives from that is, say I'm the carrier and I see all this information and I decide to still go forward with utilizing this entity. What's the risk for making that decision? Because I imagine it would almost fall on negligence at that point.
Absolutely. This is, from our perspective within our platform, that we do have different levels of users and permissions as well. So oftentimes you may have like the admin. If it hits a review status, it automatically has to have an approval by admin. So a lot of this is just training and kind of just like what the broker has in place. But in our system, though, you're going to actually see the determination. We're giving you all the data. There's still people just like today, Dale, they're like, nope, still going to use them. And it's like, we tried.
So if someone like Sage, our earlier guest, had, someone working for him and they decided to, hey, I'm going to ignore this, he'd get an alert that bypass was made. So it's kind of like a check.
It is a check because what we have is the industry standard risk assessment. So, hey, this is what we recommend. This is what you should use as like a baseline. But you're able to kind of clone that, make it your own. If you want, let's say that you have like a really expensive loader. Some of the goods that you have are like the would you say it was a windmill fan blade? Say you have those and those are like super expensive. Well, maybe on your assessment, you won't let a carrier who has not done like 10 loads for you ever move an expensive good, Or, I mean, there's certain things like that in place. But yeah, I mean, overall, if they do get a load stolen, I mean, we'll go back and say, hey, well, based on our standard, that should have been an automatic fail, or this should have been a review.
Yeah, you didn't follow our recommendation type thing. And I think that's huge because information's power. And if you have the information at your fingertips, why wouldn't you use it? I mean, that's your reputation as a carrier or a broker that you're trying to protect. If you're enlisting, your company or Dale's company's help to help you combat that, I can't imagine why you wouldn't use the information that you guys are supplying.
Great. Yeah, we get that all the time. We tell them not only is this guy maybe, he hasn't had enough inspections, or those are all subjective data. Anytime you use subjective data, you can easily manipulate that data and change a good guy to bad guy to good. Objective data means he's breaking the law. So we're saying I wouldn't use this guy to break, because I get it all the time. Hey, I know this guy had a red X because it's a violation of the law. He's affiliated with 15 other MC numbers, that didn't disclose the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. But boy, we've been using them for 5 years. Then 2 weeks later, you get a call and say, hey, Dale, can you check this guy out because my load is stolen? Well, I told you 2 weeks ago that this guy. So now you have fun fighting the insurance company, because one of the things they're going to look at is what did you do to mitigate that problem? And so what I try to do, and I want to go back to what Sage says, it was really important about when you talk about interviewing the drivers, interviewing the carriers. That's probably the best fraud way to get around fraud, is to develop relationships, right? Carriers and brokers have to be working together. We call it the interview process. We call it our Delta program. Don't even let them aboard. And that's the interview process that the Federal Motor Carrier should be, the FMCSA should be doing when they apply. If it says I'm a U.S. citizen, check. You wouldn't believe how many people have checked, because we order those forms from the FOIA office. And we don't just run algorithms and all those kind of things. We dig deep into the information. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps as an investigator. I know how to find things. And so that's what we spend a lot of our time doing. It's just not some, crapshoot. We'll let an algorithm figure it out.
You mean the FMCSA?
If they don't check them at the very beginning, we're so open to fraud. It's almost like if the first act that you're going to commit into our trucking industry is committing fraud to get in, it's not going to get better.
Yeah, I imagine it kind of goes along the lines of the glass ceiling, or method that a lot of law enforcement. If you're willing to break it here, then what's going to stop you from breaking a law later on, or another one, or another one? It becomes a segue. Where is your line in the sand? And if you have to commit fraud just to do business, that's not a great start. That's not a great foundation for any relationship that's going to be working with you.
Right. And if somebody steals a load of $2 million load of Nike tennis shoes, no one really cares. It's not my jurisdiction. You got to check with the shipper's jurisdiction. All these kind of things happen. But boy, if you steal a 1998 Honda Civic, it's all over the place. That's Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, that kind of brings up a good point too, is getting to know the carriers that you're working with, but then also, building a relationship with the shipper too. Saying, hey, when that truck comes in, verify the MC, or DOT right on the door. And I think, utilizing that hands-free, Siri technology is going to be huge there, which is basically it's part of what he has built out in his app on his phone. You can just say, hey, free validate, check this DOT. Shippers can be just looking at the truck, pull it up. I think that's super important too.
And I built the hands-free Siri and Alexa technology in our app. And I did it when I was an owner-operator, when I had in my mind. If a broker gives me a load and I get it off on one of the load boards, how do I know if this guy's good? My dispatcher may know, but it's only me and my wife, and she's dispatching for me. So I got to log into somewhere, check them all out. I wanted the dispatcher to be sitting in his, I wanted the truck driver to be sitting in his truck and say, hey, Siri, check freight validate. And within 3 seconds, we enter an MC number. Within 3 seconds, we know if they're good or bad, like instantly. Don't even take a load from them. Or you'll say if they're a carrier or a broker. There's the platforms in the past, before we started this, did not check on brokers. They were only beating up on carriers. Check this carrier, check this carrier. There's a lot of bad brokers that are giving loads to carriers who are bad carriers.
That That checks out. I mean, brokers are not winning any popularity contest out there in today's world. Definitely not on cents per mile. I think Sage had one of the most tame interviews with us yet.
Yeah, well, and speaking of things getting stolen, our time is about out. So real quick, before you guys go and before we go, that's a lot of really interesting stuff with a lot of potential and a big future. Where can people go to find out more about you guys?
Well, I'm all over LinkedIn, probably too much. Dale Prax, our LinkedIn, and also our website is www.freightvalidate.com.
Yeah, and we're at MyCarrierPortal.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, but I would probably go to our company page for that because I kind of post like silly stuff mostly. But I try to intertwine, freight news and stuff like that. Or you can reach out to me directly and Boaz at MyCarrierPortal.com too.
With that being said, all good things coming to an end. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.